Reading is what opens the doors for anything you're going to do in life. It's how you take in information. It's how you think critically. It's how you explore the world.
I'd always loved reading. It has been a huge part of my life always. And I started to volunteer at a children's library in Charlotte County. And we had a little Post-it note packet on the desk. And whenever a kid would come in, we were supposed to do a little tick on the Post-it note pad. And there were days where I would have no ticks on the pad. It really confused me as to why there were no kids. And so I thought, well, this isn't right. So I did a lot of research. I found out that 1 in 5 adults in Southside Virginia is functionally illiterate. I found out that we are the poorest and least educated region of the state, which I did not know. You know, the prospects of becoming a reader are so much lower if you don't come from a reading home. And if that sort of thing just doesn't come together, then you're not going to become a reader. Your chances are very slim. You can learn to read at school. The mechanics of reading are there. But there's a big difference between knowing how to do something and then doing it. I did a lot of legwork. I talked to a lot of schools, tried to figure out what was going on there. There's so much red tape involved with working within the school system. Teachers can only do so much. You know, I teach now myself, and there's never enough time. There's never enough time to give each kid. There's never enough time to do all the things you want to do. And so I thought, well, what can I do to add to the resources for these children? What can we do to stand in the gap for these kids? And I thought, what if I could make the greatest field trip in the world? And so I thought, well, I'll start the Virginia Children's Book Festival. We're not a literacy organization. We don't teach kids how to read. What we want to do is create a desire for kids to read. And so we want to create that culture in Virginia. We want to create a culture of literacy, a culture of reading in Virginia. We want every kid, regardless of circumstance, to become a lifelong reader. That's our goal. That's our mission.
I can't stress enough how important reading is, and I think it needs to be told to kids probably in a new way, because I think all my life we were told, oh, reading is fundamental, but I think kids need to be shown in as many ways as possible why reading is important. It really is the building blocks to everything, even outside of your school learning. If you become a reader, you will always be a knowledge seeker.
And it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, because I didn't think anybody would say no. I mean, how could anybody say no? You know, it's for the kids. Again, I'd never been to a book festival before, which I think actually helped me a lot, because the way the Virginia Children's Book Festival developed, it's very different from other book festivals, but it took several years. I met with a state senator who told me, no thanks, we're happy with the way things are. Of course, that just made me more adamant that it was going to happen. So one day, after probably, I guess, 4 years of planning and talking and reaching out, we went to Longwood. We came to Longwood, and we met with Susie Palmer, who was the dean of the library at that time. And so I went in, and we sort of gave our little spiel, had a little packet, and Susie said, okay. And we said, what? And she said, yeah. She said, sure, how about October? And so I remember saying to Susie, I said, okay, that's great. Thank you for saying yes, but where do I go for the big yes? She said, I am the big yes. And I was like, okay, that's good to know. Everything really ramped up, and I started to figure out that, boy, this costs money and this takes a lot of planning. And at that time, I didn't have the relationships with Longwood that I do now. So it was sort of it was very guerrilla action, making sure everything happened. And I just sort of looked at the books my own kids enjoyed, and I just cold called authors. And I said, hey, this is getting started. Would you be interested? And how much do you charge? But we had about 700 kids that first year. So 700 kids the first year, I think, was a success for any new event. And it really took Just a couple of years for us, we were up to 6,000, then 8,000, then 10,000, just year after year. And our relationships grew and the authors grew, and we sort of figured out who we wanted to be and what we were doing. And it has just exploded since then, really. And I mean, every year I'm amazed. I like to sit and watch the buses come and unload. And, you know, we have a mile of school buses that come in every day. And it's just thousands and thousands and thousands of children. And they're so happy to be here and to be a part of it. And I just pinch myself because I can't believe it, really.
The importance, I think, of reading for children is like me, I didn't read when I was little, and all I did was memorize books, and therefore I had to repeat second grade because I couldn't read. And I think it's really important to recognize that there are different kind of learners. And I was a visual learner, and some other kids are visual. They're gonna learn differently. They're gonna learn to read differently. But once they do, they can see themselves in books. And I think it's so important for kids to be able to see themselves in books, because I think it makes them better, stronger human beings.
The way we do things is different because we realize that we have to work extra hard to get kids' attention, to keep it, to get them to want to read more. And so we design our programming so it's really interactive. You know, we get a featured illustrator, and then we plan a lot of programming around that illustrator. He designs a mural that then the entire community gets to come paint with the illustrator and with Monty. And when that's finished, it's donated to a different organization that we've chosen. The very first one we ever did was with Todd Parr, and that's hanging at the Children's Hospital at VCU. It's hanging in their lobby. I can't say enough about what that brings to the festival that other places just don't have.
What is really important is to make reading available to children as early as possible, to make books available to children as young as can be, because access to those books, it's one thing to be able to read. It's another thing to be able to have access to material to read. That's where a festival like this is critically important.
Access, desire, and diversity. So a kid can want to read, they can have the mechanical skill to read, but if they don't have access to books, then they're not going to be able to read. We want kids to not just see themselves in books, but to see other people in books. It leads to empathy, it leads to understanding of oneself and of others. And so, you know, when a kid can connect with the book, and it doesn't have to be about your race or your gender or, you know, anything else. It doesn't have to be about that. It can be just about, you know, a kid who thinks like you do. If kids can see that and identify, then they just feel more whole. And that's what books can do for you. Not only can they help you dream bigger and take you outside of yourself, but they can help you stay with yourself and be comfortable there.
I just go back to when I was a kid. Basically, reading was my biggest form of joy and escape. And through books, we're able to go into different worlds, our imaginations are just let loose. But we can also learn a lot about ourselves and the world we live in by reading. And so I do think it's important for kids to read about characters who are both like themselves, so they can see themselves represented, but also kids who are different than them, so they can have like this developing empathy for other people.
For us, it's the right book in the hands of the right kid at the right time. When you see kids here and you see them with an author who's taking time to talk to them, when you hear somebody say, a kid say, oh, Mr. Todd's coming in about a month, and you realize that Todd Parr, who is one of the most successful children's book authors in the world, has seen these kids every year for 11 years. He knows them by name. He asks them how school is going, even if they're, you know, too old to go to his sessions. When you see that they count these people as a part of their lives, when you see that high schoolers who were gonna drop out or were not gonna go to college, ask a book festival volunteer, where is the admissions office? Can you take me there? I love what is happening here. When there are kids who say to Sophie Blackall, can I be an illustrator too? I didn't know girls could do that. When you see that all day, every day, that's not numbers. You know, I mean, these are kids whose lives have been expanded in ways that we couldn't predict, that they didn't expect. When I give a book to a child and they say, can I keep this? I've never had a book of my own before. That's where I count success. I mean, all the numbers in the world, they're very meaningful, but that's how I count success.